I am a son of the Father, pre-existent and born of the divine light. My soul does not belong to your world. My world, a Gnostic prayer for protection and liberation. A Gnostic prayer for protection and liberation. I am a son of the Father, pre-existent and born of the divine light. My soul does not belong to your world, nor do I bow to the chains of the material creation, of your material creation. In the name of I, A, O, the eternal and unseen, and by the wisdom of Holy Sophia, I command you, archons of the seven heavens, to stand back. You have no power over the spark. What in the world can't I freaking read? A Gnostic prayer for protection and liberation. I am a person. I am a son of the Father, pre-existent and born of the divine light. My soul does not belong to your world, nor do I bow to the chains of the material creation, to your material creation. In the name of I, A, O, the eternal and unseen, and by the wisdom of Holy Sophia, I command you, archons of the seven heavens, to stand back. Ye have no power of the spark of the pleroma within me. I look upwards to the unbegotten light, severing the cords of illusion, fear, and ignorance. I am filled with Gnosis, the true awakening. And by this light, I am forever shielded and free. Amen. Let the darkness dissolve. Why can't I? It feels like I can't. So it's the freaking archons. It's the shadow. And you're not supposed to. It's being mad at life. It's like walking into a gym and yelling at the heaviest weights just because he can't pick them up. So we have to understand what's going on with this religion. Is just blinding us, humanity, preventing us from evolving to our maximum potential. Science has been pushed back since the dawn of time. They've been just sacrificing for invisible people in the sky. I am a son of the Father, pre-existent and born of the divine light. My soul does not belong to your world, nor do I bow to the chains of your material creations. In the name of I, A, O, eternal and unseen, and by the wisdom of Holy Sophia, I command you, archons of the seven heavens, to stand back. You have no power over the spark of the pleroma within me. I look upward to the unbegotten light, severing the cord of illusion, fear, and ignorance. I am filled with Gnosis, the true awakening, and by this light I am forever shielded and free. Amen. Abrazax. Let good and evil sit at the table. What if good and evil aren't two armies fighting for control? What if the real battle is our refusal to sit at the same table with the darkness inside ourselves? Please forgive me. I need to actually develop my linguistic skills. I need to practice my tongue twisters. I need to start reading poems. I also have a couple of raps. I need to go through poems. Abrazax. Let good and evil sit at the table. What if good and evil aren't two armies fighting for control? What if the real battle is our refusal to sit at the same table with the darkness inside ourselves? It's comprehending the darkness. Don't just push it to the side or bury it. A candle doesn't destroy the darkness. It simply burns inside of it. And maybe that's the lesson with Abrazax. Not to extinguish the darkness, but to worship it. Not to worship it, but to understand it. We spend our lives dividing reality. Good versus evil, light versus darkness, God versus the devil, us versus them. But what happens when we stop running from the contradiction? What happens when we allow both sides to sit at the table? Not so evil can rule, not so good can surrender, but so that we can finally see the whole human being. I want to come back and get rid of some of these tables. There's too many tables in the room. And another thing, that there is no laughing matter about what's happening with this Islam. They're God. So the people that are actually doing the unthinkable things are praying to the same God. So that should have been an alarm on my behalf too. I'm 38 and I'm barely coming around to religion, and this religion needs to be. It's not a religion, because Sharia law allows for the man to marry up to 4 wives. More, the age is 0, and the husband is able to strike and beat their wives, and women get cut off from education at a very young age, and they can't go to work. If they need to go to a doctor, it would have to be a woman doctor, and that's really sad because there is no women doctor. So the flame is fragile. One breath could extinguish it, yet the darkness surrounds it. It doesn't make the flame meaningless. It makes the flame visible. Maybe that's what conscious is. Not eliminating the darkness, but the ability to carry the light without pretending the darkness does not exist. Abrazak has fascinated people for centuries as a mysterious figure associated with opposing forces and cosmic complexity. And that's where I find the symbol most powerful, because life isn't simple. We can be compassionate and selfish, brave and afraid, loving and angry, capable of creation and destruction. The question isn't, can I eliminate every dark part of myself? The better question is, can I become conscious of it? Because when you deny your darkness, you don't necessarily destroy it. You may simply push it to underground, and it may be buried. Doesn't always disappear. Sometimes it waits. So I'm not asking you to become evil. I'm asking you to stop pretending that you have never encountered it. Look at your anger, look at your jealousy, look at your fear, look at your ego. Look at the things that you're ashamed to admit exist inside of you. Bring them to the table again. Just bring them forward, sit with them, understand them, and then choose what you will do with them. Right, it's like putting them in a box. A jar, for example. Everything gives off fumes. A decomposing body, for example, as soon as we start deteriorating, the body starts to release gases. There's records of caskets exploding underground because they're so tightly. All those gases, they become ticking time bombs. So that's the same thing with the emotions. Everything, just examine and let them pass. Don't judge them because they're not yours. We're in a river. Imagine we're like a pillar in a river, and our thoughts are the water. You can't do nothing about it. Just let them go. Don't hang on to them. Because when you deny your darkness, you don't necessarily destroy it. You may slip it, push it underground, and if it was buried, it doesn't always disappear. Sometimes, I'm not asking you to become evil. Okay, we already went through this. Because the goal isn't to put the flame out. The goal is to become conscious enough to protect it. Right, another theory that I came across, the candle. It's like taking a candle outside. The sun is much brighter than the candle itself. So and the wind is either it's gonna get blinded out by the sun, or the wind is gonna snuff it out. That's where the darkness comes in play. It keeps the fire lit, and it keeps us a reminder in our minds, what are we fighting for? Freedom of speech is actually being taken away in the UK. People are getting arrested for protesting peacefully. So I've also known there's a key factor. We cannot, don't get me, if I had the power, I am going to get my studies together, because I haven't been able to get I just need to get my math, get my GED, and and jump on the force because this is uncalled for. Sharia law will never. This is as far as Islam is going to get. They took advantage of our kindness, and as if they start acting up, they're going to get deported. And if they start to getting aggressive, we are in our right to use force to defend ourselves, because records show they have been conquering, killing, robbing. Islam had nothing to do with any of this. Islam is a brand new religion. It has not been around. There's history, there's records, thank God for the internet, that there's records now that Islam is missing 200 years old. Muhammad died at 632 AD, and then 200 years later, that's when they started writing the Quran and multiple versions of it. So supposedly, the Prophet received the revelation verbally, nothing was written. And there's a saying, when you take 100 people, you line them up, you whisper a book into one person, and that person has to whisper that book into someone else. There's already going to be, I can already guarantee, I am 110% positive that I won't even remember. And that goes for even the most, go ahead, even if you find photographic memory people, there's not that many of them in the world to able. Long story short, there's way too many flaws in a blindly belief system. Just like Christianity, I also have my beliefs that the early Christians were Gnostic, but the literature didn't fall into their agenda, so it had to be erased. That's why in 1945, 13 leather-bound books were just recently discovered in Egypt. And we lost some of those pages because they were so poor that she needed Kindle for fire. But it is weird because it's in Egypt and it's always hot over there. Long story short. Also, there's a story of the book Muhammad. They had written down a couple pages and a goat came in and ate it. But anyways, I have proof that there is 200 years of no type of writing of Muhammad, and the verbal stuff, even the smartest, everybody should agree about that. You cannot take not even a sentence, say it, and it will be the same by the time it gets. You're gonna accent the way people speak. And I lost my place. I have to make sure I don't do that. I need to finish this. Abrazax, fine. Okay, so maybe good and evil aren't simply external enemies. Maybe they're questions. Every moment gives us a choice. Will we create or destroy? Will we forgive or retaliate? Will we seek truth or protect our illusion? Will we become prisoners of our darkness or learn from it? Abrazax doesn't have to represent the destruction of morality. It can represent something more uncomfortable. The confrontation with contradiction. The willingness to look into the abyss without becoming the abyss. Excuse me. So let the good and evil sit. Let the light meet in the darkness. Let the questions remain unanswered for a moment. But whatever happens, don't put out the flame. Because perhaps the flame is conscious itself. Abrazax. Know the darkness, protect the light. Choose what you become. Abracadabra. I am Monad. Abracadabra. I am Monad. Not a king. Not a god demanding worship. Not a weapon, but a symbol of the one beginning before beginnings, the source beyond everything, the source behind everything. Before there were names, before there were nations, before there were religions, before there were separation, there was one, the monad, the unknowable source, the unity behind the many. And then came division, light and darkness, spirit and matter, creator and creation, self and other. We spend our lives looking for something outside ourselves, while ancient Gnostics asked a radically different question. What if the divine spark is already within us? Maybe I am monad isn't a declaration of ego. Maybe a declaration, maybe the destruction of ego. Because if everything ultimately comes from the one, then the walls we build between ourselves becomes to look different. You, me, the stranger, the enemy, the universe, all participating in existence. But don't underestimate me. I am monad. Doesn't mean I am better than everyone else. It means I am part of something greater than my individual identity. Maybe good. The ego says, I am separate. Gnosis asks, are you sure? Abracadabra, a word, a declaration, a mystery. And perhaps the real magic isn't changing the world with a spell. Perhaps the real magic is changing the person looking back at you in the mirror. To know yourself, to question what is known, to question what you know, to question what you've been taught, to confront your darkness, to seek the light, to recognize the difference between what you truly are and what the world told you to become. That is the beginning of Gnosis. So when I say abracadabra, I am monad, I don't mean that I am evolved. I don't mean that I became the ruler of reality. I mean, I remember the question, where did I come from? What am I? Why am I here? And that's what lies beyond the illusion of separation. Maybe we spend our entire life searching for the source, only to discover that the search itself was the beginning of awakening. Abracadabra. I am monad. Know yourself. Seek the truth. Remember the light. So here's the proof that I was talking about earlier. Islam's missing first century. So we're going to examine this because Muslims are extremely dangerous. There's examples when they go on parades, they hit themselves. That is proof that they are willing to go to the extreme for their beliefs. Also, their praying in public is the same equivalence as a dog urinating on a tree or on a post. It's just marking their territory. That's exactly what they're doing. What is the story? What if the story you inherit about a religious founder was written down generations after he died? Would that automatically make it false? No. But it would make one thing absolutely necessary: investigation. Because history is not simply about what a tradition says. It is about asking, when was it written? Who wrote it? What sources did they use, and how close were they to the events? Christianity and Islam both make an enormous claim about history. Christianity says Jesus lived, taught, was crucified, and rose from the dead. Islam says Muhammad received revelations, preached the Quran, established a community, fought wars, and became the final prophet. But here is where the historical comprehension gets interesting. The early Christian writings were extremely early. Paul's letters were written within decades of Jesus' death. And the chronicles of the Gospels are generally dated in the 1st century. But remember, even Christianity does not possess the original manuscripts of the First Testament. So the real question isn't, do we have the originals? We don't. The question is, how early is our evidence, and how well can we trace it? And how well can we, To consider Muhammad's biography, the traditional biography is associated with Ibn Ishaq, who lived in the 8th century, generations after Muhammad. His original biography did not survive intact. Instead, the most famous surviving forms through the later transmissions and editing, especially through Ibn Isham, and this is where your historical investigation begins. Not with everything is fake, but with how can later sources tell us how much can later sources tell us about an earlier century? Modern historians have debated this question intensely. Some revisiting scholars, including John Wenzenberg, argued for extremely late developments of the Islamic scriptures and traditions, but those theories remain controversial. Later scholars have challenged some of their conclusions. So do not turn a scholarly hypothesis into a provoked fact. Instead, ask the question, what can actually be demonstrated? And here's where the story gets even more interesting, because there's a physical evidence. The Birmingham Quran contained a portion of Surah 18, 19, and 20. Radioactive carbon testing placed the parchment between approximately 568 and 645 CE with a 95.4 probability. That places the parchment remarkably close to Muhammad's life. So anyone claiming that there was absolutely no Quranic manuscripts evidence anywhere near the 7th century is overstating the case. But here is the important distinction. A manuscript fragment does not automatically answer every question about authorship, compilation, transmissions, or interpretations. It proves the Quranic text existed early. It doesn't by any itself reconstruct the entire history of how the text came together, and that's where the historical criticism becomes important. So what he's about this, yes, there are a couple pages that they did find, but it had nothing to do with Islam. They were actual songs of Jesus Christ. Also, Arabic before the modern age, they have dots now. Back then, the original Arabic doesn't have any dots. That's I'm gonna also address that. Now consider another problem. The Quran has a history of different The Quran has a different history reading traditions. Muslim scholarships developed systems of transmits recognized readings through chains of readers and transmitters. Eventually, certain readings became authoritative within the Islamic tradition. That raises an important question. So all of this is oral. See, that's another problem. How did oral transmissions, written manuscripts, regional traditions, and later standardized interact? This isn't an insult to Muslims. It's simply the same kind of questions historians have asked about every ancient religion text. Section 5 of the Hadiths. And with the Hadiths, literature containing sayings and reports attributes to Muhammad, what the major chronicle collections were compiled substantially after Muhammad's lifetime. That means historians cannot simply say it's a later collection, therefore Muhammad definitely said it. Instead, scholars examine chains of transmissions and variant reports, manuscripts, contradictions, historical context, and literary development. Even with Islamic scholarships, enormous intellectual systems developed to evaluate whether individual reports were reliable. That's important because it means Muslims themselves recognize the historical problem. Not every report attributed to Muhammad could simply be accepted without examination. So now, compare the historical situation. Christian sources about Jesus also have transmission problems. Islam sources about Muhammad also have transmission problems. Neither tradition gets a free pass. The question is, which evidence is earliest, which evidence is closest to the events, which traditions can be immediately corroborated, and which claims appears only much later. This is how responsible historical investigation works. And this brings us to the question that matters. Brings us to the question that matters the most, not merely Muhammad historical real. How was Muhammad historically reliable? But what did Jesus actually teach? Because there's a significant stream of early Christian literature that emphasizes something radically different from political power. The Gospel of Thomas, discovered amongst a non-Hammadi text containing some same attributes to Jesus, emphasizing discovery of the divine reality within and around the seeker. And the famous saying begins, "The kingdom is inside you." And another theme running with Gnostic Christianity is Gnosis, not merely believing information about God, but awakening to the divine knowledge. Section 8, the Gnostic Challenge. The Gnostic tradition asks a disturbing question. What if humanity has forgotten something about itself? What if spiritual liberation begins with awakening? What if the greatest prison isn't made of stone, but ignorance? In some Gnostic system, the human being contains a divine element, often described as a pneuma. Spirit. The goal is awakening, knowledge, transformation, return to the divine source, and that gives us a completely different kind of religious warfare. Not warfare against people, warfare against ignorance. Not the sword, words. Not domination, awakening. Jesus' way. And this is where I believe Jesus became especially powerful. Jesus says, "You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." John 8:32. Notice the language. Know truth, freedom. That's the heart of Gnosis. And Jesus does not tell his followers, conquer your neighbor. He tells them to love thy neighbor. He tells them to forgive. He tells them that the greatness comes through serving. So if you were going to call ourselves warriors of Jesus, let our weapons be truth, knowledge, compassion, courage, and love. Section 5. And this is where the message becomes bigger than Christianity versus Islam, because religious arguments can become dangerous when people stop seeing human beings for human beings. If you believe Islam is wrong, don't hate Muslims. If you believe Christianity is true, don't use Christianity as an excuse for cruelty. Challenge ideas, investigate evidence, read the primary sources, ask difficult questions, and protect human beings. Because if Jesus taught us anything, it is to be the person standing in front of you. Because if Jesus taught us something, it is that the person standing in front of you is not your enemy simply because they believe differently. So was Muhammad's traditional biography written down too late to be helpful? It's not a simple yes or no question. Did Islam have an early text evidence? Yes. Does the Birmingham manuscripts demonstrate the Quranic material existed very early? Yes. The early Islamic biographies of a hadith collection historically identical to eyewitness transcripts? No. The scholars disagree about how much later Islamic literatures can reliably tell us about the 7th century. Absolutely. And that's precisely why we should investigate. Don't fear the questions, follow the evidence. Read the Quran, Bible, Nag Hammadi, early Christian writings, Muslim historians, the critiques, and then think for yourself, because if the truth really is the truth, it shouldn't need fear. The greatest battle isn't Christianity against Muslim. It isn't West against East. It isn't one human being against the other. The greatest battle is between ignorance and knowledge, between fear and truth, between hatred and love. And if you choose Jesus, then become a warrior of words. Never a warrior against people, a warrior against ignorance. Seek the truth, know yourself, love your enemy, fear no question. Excellent. I felt really good talking about that one. So we're gonna baby talk about Gnostic now. Gnosis equals knowing, not just believing God exists. It is more like, I want to know God. Then you can explain the biggest idea. God equals the monad, the ultimate divine source. The pleroma is the fullness of the divine reality. Aeons. Divine expressions of emanations of the various Gnostic systems. Sophia. Wisdom of an important figure in 7 Gnostic traditions. Demiurge, a lesser creator figure in the Gnostic system, not simply Satan. Archons, cosmic rulers, powers of the Gnostic theme. Jesus Christ, the revealer who brings awakening and knowledge of the divine. And here is where your Jesus-centered interpretation can become really interesting. Gnosticism says wake up. Jesus says seek. Gnosis says know. And Christianity says know God through Christ. One important distinction for your video: ancient Gnosticism wasn't one single unified religion. In scholars' debates, which text could actually be called Gnostic. For example, the Gospel of Thomas is sometimes classified as Gnostic, but that classification is disputed. So I would avoid saying all Gnostic beliefs exactly like this. Instead, say some ancient Gnostic traditions taught. That makes this channel much more harder to attack on historical accuracy. The baby talk formula. Think of every episode as, what if? What is it? Why does it matter? Where is Jesus? And where does it mean? What does it mean for you? For example, what is the monad? Okay, baby talk. Imagine everything comes from one ultimate source. You can't put God in a box. You can't draw the beginning of God. God is the source behind everything. Gnostics call this the ultimate mystery of the monad. And then comes the biggest question. If God is perfect, why does our world contain so much suffering, ignorance, and confusion? That's where the Gnosis story gets wild. Sophia, the demiurge, the archons, the divine spark, and Jesus, the revealer who brings knowledge. That gives us a very easy YouTube storytelling structure without dumping compilations theology on your audience. And honestly, I think your strongest series could be Gnosticism for Babies. Episode 1, what is Gnosis? I guess this is where it ends. Clear where you're presenting historically Gnostic ideas versus your own Christian Gnostic interpretation. Okay.